In October of 1918, roughly 550 men of the 77th pushed into the Argonne, past the units meant to guard their flanks. Early fighting would pair them to some 300. Within a day, they were cut off. For nearly 6 days, the pocket held, with no resupply and no way to signal their own artillery. Every man carried only what he had walked in with, the rounds in his belt, one canteen, and nothing came forward to replace it. This was not chaos. Headquarters was running a system off a map that no longer matched the ground below it. The lost battalion was surrounded on paper before it was ever surrounded in the trees. Or the map simply lied, and no one knew which. This is a study of a signals failure so complete the men were shelled by their own guns, and of the one decision that broke it. Welcome to the Tactical Historian, where battles are read like blueprints. To understand how those men were nearly destroyed by their own artillery, go back to the morning of October 3, 1918, when the 77th walked into the Argonne and kept walking. On paper, the 77th carried 4 separate ways to reach the rear, stacked so that no single loss could cut the line. Telephone wire ran back through the trees. Runners could carry a folded message on foot. Rockets could throw a flare above the canopy, and a wicker crate held a handful of homing pigeons. One channel could fail, not all 4 in the same hour. That was the wager. The Argonne broke each in its own way. A shell found the wire and cut it in the same instant. A runner had to cross the same ring of Germans that had sealed the pocket. Rockets only showed the enemy where the pocket sat. That left the birds, flown by the Signal Corps Pigeon service, roughly 600 along that front. But earlier that day, the battalion had sent 2 toward the loft, and German riflemen shot both down before they cleared the tree line. 4 channels look like 4 chances, but one encirclement answers them all. On my blueprint, that redundancy was only ever a line on paper. Cher Ami, now generally reckoned a black check hen, was the last message carrier the 77th had left. The last channel was a bird, and on my blueprint, even a bird still needs a hand to launch it. That hand belonged to Major Charles Whittlesey, a peacetime lawyer now commanding the battalion in the pocket. Hold the ground, keep the men, reach a rear that could no longer hear him. By the 4th of October, the pocket's forward edge sat close enough to touch the enemy line. The 77th's artillery, working from that stale map, had begun dropping its barrage onto the coordinate where the battalion actually stood. So Whittlesey spent his last line. The note, clipped to Cher Ami and now kept at the Smithsonian, read plainly, "We are along the road parallel to 276.4, and our own artillery is dropping on us." A grid reference and a plea, no more. Then a 25-mile flight over the same ring of Germans that had downed the 2 birds before her. A plan is only as good as the ground it lands on when contact starts. This one met at the instant she cleared the timber, and the rifles below found her. The lofts held plenty of birds, but they sat miles back. Only the few already carried into the pocket could fly, and she was the last. Every backup Whittlesey held ran through the same 25 miles of German-held air, and the enemy did not have to defeat each channel in turn. He held one ring, and one ring answered them all. 600 birds cannot outnumber a single encirclement, and a channel that arrives late is not a channel that arrived. His own artillery was walking its barrage onto the pocket while the note traveled, so every minute Cher Ami stayed aloft was a minute those guns kept firing on his men. The delay was the loss.
German rifle fire caught her in the first minute, one leg all but shot away, yet the capsule stayed clipped, and she kept the loft's line. By the commonly cited estimate, she crossed those 25 miles in about as many minutes, reached the loft, and only then collapsed. A staff officer counts channels on a page. I read this board like a blueprint, and the man who spent the last one still had to answer for how it fell.
Read this board like a blueprint, and the loss runs backward. As a chain, not one blow, each break setting up the next. The barrage fell because the guns could not hear the pocket. They could not hear because the wire was cut. The wire was cut because the battalion had advanced past the point the map remembered, ahead of the units meant to hold its flanks. That same gap severed the wire. The break in the line and the fire on it were one wound, entered at 2 points. By the time relief arrived, roughly a third of the force was dead or wounded. Some fell to German fire, some to their own guns walking a barrage across the coordinate where the map said no one stood, and no ledger can cleanly divide the two. But the message was not spent for nothing. 194 men walked out of the roughly 300 who had gone in. The barrage stopped in time. Sources disagree on the exact figures, but not the shape. A wounded hen closed a loop the wire could not. The guns lifted, and a little under 200 men crossed back over the ground that had swallowed the rest. Said this beside Verdun, where the French held one narrow track under fire, a channel that ran slow but held. The comparison is incomplete. The lost battalion lost its whole line to a channel that closed, and an encirclement answers every wire, runner, and flare with the same silence. This was not incompetence wearing the mask of fate. The men held a week on what they carried in, the staff read the board correctly, and the only channel left to spend was one wounded hen. They spent it, and it closed the loop. The terrain beat them before the Germans did. Cher Ami won the Croix de Guerre with Palm, and her taxidermied body still stands in a case at the Smithsonian. Major Charles Whittlesey walked out with the men the message saved, then, in 1921, vanished from a Havana-bound ship. No body, no note, widely presumed a suicide. A wire that arrives late is not a wire that arrived at all. The same arithmetic as a barrage that lifts an hour after the men it was killing have already moved. So, wire dead and runners gone. Would you have committed the bird any sooner, or held her one more hour, hoping the line came back? Redundancy is a promise the ground has to keep. Here it kept just one channel, a wounded hen, and one was enough. Read a battle by which channel arrived, not by who was brave. This is the Tactical Historian, where battles are read like blueprints.